Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or if you're watching this on our rapidly growing YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THL staff writer Brandon P. Joining me today from John Paul Jones Arena in Charlottesville, Virginia, is our very own publisher, Mr. Andrew Jones. And AJ, we just watched North Carolina get their eighth straight loss in Charlottesville, losing to 65-58, falling 11-6 overall and 3-3 in the ACC today. RJ Davis led North Carolina in points with 16 points, including 3 for 5 from the three-point line. But AJ, I think the most obvious thing that we have to start off with is the most significant thing that happened in the game, and that's the injury to Armando Bacot. He got injured in, I believe, the second minute of the game. North Carolina came in with Justin McCoy. Jalen Washington gave them some good minutes. So how did you think the Tar Heels responded to that early adversity of Armando Bacot getting injured?
Keep in mind, they already didn't have Pete Nance.
Yeah.
So they didn't have any of their two bigs. And it was 18:42, so it was minute 18 in. So, by the way, in two ACC games in this state, Armando has played 78 seconds.
Oh, yeah.
They lost both games, and they could have used him in both games, obviously. So, how did they do without him? Not that well at first. I thought Justin struggled some. As soon as he was the first one off the bench, and he got serenaded with boos, and I don't know if it affected him or not. I would imagine, it's human. It could. But the team didn't play well in that stretch, so it wasn't really on him. I'm not sure they would have played well with Armando in the game. The difference is Armando would have given him the post option to run things through. And we made such a big deal out of Armando's improvement in dealing with double teams, which is what UVA does to the post, dribbling out of double teams and not trying to make the great pass, but make an easy pass. And he came into this game with 12 assists in the last 3 games. Through the first 13, he had 15 assists. So, and teams have been doubling him. So obviously that was a positive thing for Carolina bringing in this game. It's something they thought maybe they could handle. So when you take that out and you don't have the Pete Nance factor, suddenly they look kind of smallish out there. And I thought that UVA, although they didn't score a whole lot, UVA was sort of the brawnier team during that period. It took Carolina a while to adjust. They didn't get great looks. They didn't score in their first 6 possessions. So it looked like it's looked so many times here. I'm sitting next to a couple of guys who cover Carolina. I'm thinking, well, you know what? I have seen this before, and I've seen a national championship team do this in here. So I've seen 1 seeds do this in here. And now we're watching this team do it. So with or without Armando, that very well could have happened. What I do think was interesting is that after maybe 4 minutes, Hubert went to Jalen Washington. And right when he entered the game, I guess it was 10-3 at one point. There's a lot of work going on here in the facility, so bear with me for some of the noise that you might hear. It was 10-3, and you're thinking, man, UVA's only up 7, but you're taught to think and conditioned to think that, a 7-point lead for UVA, no matter what went in the game, was always a lot more, right? Mm-hmm. So, but it was still only 7. They just needed a couple possessions, and boom, they'd be right back in it, so to speak. And they did get that. They got a bucket from RJ, make it 10-5. Caleb scored to make it 10-7. By that was his only basket for a long time. He went the next 24 minutes and 13 seconds without scoring. Game minutes, that is, which is amazing that they were even in it with him shooting like that. But it became a Jalen Washington show. The Jalen Washington breakout party. It commenced at that time. He scored 5 straight points. Then there was a period he scored 7 of 9, and then he also scored 12 of their next 22 points. In fact, 12 of their last 22 points in the half. What I think is amazing, and Jalen was a big part of this. I thought he gave them a ton of energy. The bench, when it was 10-3, they were all seated. When it was 16-13 and 19-13, and Jalen is just doing his thing on Shedrick, the bench is up. Everybody is up. It was a totally different thing, and I think that's the juice that Jalen gave them. And in fact, the last 22 points of the first half were scored by guys not named Bacot, Nance, Love, and Davis. And they had the lead. And they had an ugly flare-up at the end of the half, so they only led by 2. They should have led by about 5-6 points going into halftime, and I think that would have made a difference, obviously, later on. But Jalen was really good. He scored 12 points in the half. He grabbed 3 rebounds in the half. He was quicker than Shedrick. his spin move, just everything on the baseline, Shedrick couldn't keep up with him. So they made a switch in the second half. They started playing Vanderplas on him a lot more. He's more athletic. He's got better feet, and he did a good job keeping Jalen from scoring. He only had 1 point in the second half. I think he had 3 boards in the second half, and Carolina couldn't run anything. You saw what happened when they couldn't run anything to the post.
Yeah.
So they just bogged down completely. But during that period, they didn't score in their first 6 possessions, but then they scored on 11 of their next 18. And that's what Jalen Washington on the floor, man. And for a while, McCoy was out there as the 4 because Leakey had a long stretch on the bench, and Justin got a bucket. DeMarco Dunn had a couple of buckets out there. He had 5 points, and you're kind of thinking, my gosh, this is like a hodgepodge group on the floor. How many minutes in practice have these guys practiced together so far this season? And they're winning in this building, and they were D'ing up pretty well too. So they play good basketball. I think that's a positive. That's something they can build on. They now have a guy that played 27 minutes in here and went 13-6. A guy who had 20 minutes on the season coming in. So that's an added layer. We've been talking about bench usage and how situational it is, and the fact that they've got different guys. This is 3 straight games a reserve has set a career high. So I think that's a big deal, or at least 2 career highs and 1 season high. So I think that's a big deal. I think that's a real big deal. And I know when the Carolina fans are going to view this emotionally, they're going to think 11-6 and 3-3, and we blew a lead and all that kind of stuff. But you can't take that aspect of the game away from them. That stays with them. That goes to Louisville, and that comes back home next week. And now the expectations for Jalen are to play better, and he may have to start in Louisville. We talked to Pete Nance in the locker room tonight after the game, and I didn't get the impression, watching him out here during warm-ups, I didn't get the impression that Pete's going to play in a few days. He might. I'm sure they're just going to keep saying day to day, he's getting close. But I asked Pete how close, and he's, I don't know. So they may have to go into Louisville with Jalen Washington as their starting 5, and also with Seth Trimble in the starting lineup. So it's an interesting time for Carolina, but I don't think it's the worst time, because I do think there's a lot of growth that's happening right now that will help them later on down the road. Jalen Washington is clearly Exhibit A in that front.
Yeah, he certainly showed promising signs of things to come in the future. And I feel like I said earlier, when he came into the game, it completely changed the dynamic for Carolina, because they had a legitimate big man in the game. And they actually got to the point where in the second half, Carolina was up by 7 in the second half, and it felt like 7 was too much for Virginia to come back from. But Virginia went on a big run, and then that big run turned out to be the final, like one of the final knockout punches for Virginia. And they held on to that lead and really never looked back. So what did you think about it?
Yeah, it was 36-29, a boom, 23-6 run. And they went up 10, 52-42. And I was highly impressed that Carolina cut it to 3 twice after that. Yeah. Highly impressed. But during that period, Carolina was awful. Hubert was asked after the game about it, moral, not a moral victory, but, did you like what you see? You had to like that you were in the game. He's like, no. These are recruited North Carolina players. He pointed to the stat sheet a couple times on the press table and just said, these guys were good enough to win this game tonight. And they were. That 23-6 run was devastating. It was terrible defensively. The dribble drive defense was really bad. Reese Beekman, right in front of me here, he just kept getting to the rim. It didn't matter who's guarding him. DeMarco Dunn struggled big time with him tonight. And also the dunks and the breakouts they got. They got a few pick sixes. Outside of that run, when it was late, Caleb and bearing the ball right over here had to pick 6 to Vanderplas for a dunk. That was it. The game was over at that point, although Carolina still had a chance before that turnover. So Carolina had 1 assist in the second half. So both sides of the court were not efficient at all. They were bad defensively for a long stretch during the game, and they were really bad offensively. Hubert said they should have had more assists because guys missed open shots. They were bogged down. I go back to Vanderplas on Jalen. Jalen was getting position on Shedrick. He wasn't getting it as much on Vanderplas. And so they had 8 assists on 12 baskets in the first half because they're running things through the post a lot more. And it's just opened stuff up. But they didn't do it in the second half, and they had 1 assist on 9 baskets. So the offensive end was bad. It was a mishmash out there. They struggled late getting RJ touches. They needed to get RJ more touches, and they struggled with that. And then, of course, in the defensive end, it's the dribble drives, it's the lack of box outs. They had a dunk on a putback. There were 3 or 4 putbacks. There was nobody put on anybody. So there are a lot of things, there are a lot of cons to learn from. But, it's January 10th. It's in Charlottesville. Boxing out shouldn't be an issue. The help side defense should be an issue, and it was during that stretch. So I'm thinking that they're going to focus on that period as much as anything else about how to get better. Because if they're 10 or 15% better, apparently there's a conference going on right behind me. They chose to do it right behind me right now instead of somewhere else. If they're 10 or 15% better during that stretch, they win this game.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and it wasn't because they were young in that stretch. They didn't do things these guys should be able to do and have done and did in the first half. Didn't do it in the second half. So they should have won this game. And I agree with Hubert. I'm going to write my column about it. He's right. Moral victories. There are a lot of things to build on, but should have won this game. They positioned themselves to win it, and then they didn't take care of business. And they are North Carolina players. We've seen a lot of young guys in this program perform when called on. So you got Trimble out there, you got Washington out there. Doesn't matter. Got to perform as a unit. Caleb's got to step up and be better. He shouldn't go 24 minutes and 13 seconds without scoring. RJ had to get open. He didn't get open. They need to find him. Leaky needs to find him. Caleb needs to find him. Although Caleb had that late flurry, shades of Philadelphia, but he needed 1 or 2 more of those earlier, and maybe wouldn't have had to hit a couple of prayer shots because one of them looked like a prayer.
Yeah. So, AJ, this is another example of North Carolina this season. They've gotten close in certain games like the Pittsburgh game, but they just haven't been able to come out with victorious. I mean, they did beat Ohio State in a close game, but they've also lost their fair share of close games. Today, again, they get close without Armando Bacot. They get close without Pete Nance, but they didn't finish the job. So what does this mean overall for North Carolina going forward?
All right, I'm going to look at this 2 ways, and I kind of hinted on it a minute ago. One, I asked RJ, and I don't think he liked the question. I don't know if they ever watch this thing. I know some of them do, but if I would rephrase it to RJ if I had a chance to ask it again, but I will paraphrase to you guys. If someone would have told you this afternoon that the last 22 points in the first half will be scored by guys, other than you, Caleb, Pete, Armando, and you guys would have the lead at halftime and had a 7-point lead in the second half and have lineups on the floor that you generally don't, have out there, what would you have thought? And I think basically he said, we're all good players. We're all capable of winning. And that's what I'm going to take away from this. So, yeah, I think there are a lot of growing things out here, especially Jalen. Jalen's an athlete. Jalen's got such a high ceiling, and I think we saw that for a long period of time. So now I think it's safe to say they should have a third big.
Yeah. And
he should be the third big if everybody's healthy, right? So, but they still should have won this game. If they would have won, it would have been an incredible victory. It would have been one of those wins where you say, wow, they went into Charlottesville and won without Pete and basically without Armando. And wondering for a long period whether or not Armando was going to come back. They said they all knew by halftime or so he probably wasn't going to play. Hubert said he didn't know until halftime Armando wasn't going to play. And gosh, if they would have won this, it would have been incredible. That would have been the storyline.
Yeah.
Hey, look at North Carolina. They bowed up. We use that term in football. They bowed up, and they got it done in that place. But they didn't get it done. And they didn't get it done not because guys that don't play as much were on the court. They didn't get it done because they didn't defend well. They didn't box out. I don't care how experienced you are. You box out. And they had a lot of sloppy turnovers, and they did not run efficient offense. So even if Jalen was doing ball screens and stuff. And, okay, so he was covered going off the ball screen. There's got to be other stuff. I just think that there's enough of them to pick at, and they want to be a national championship contender, so there cannot be moral victories.
Yeah.
There's growth moments. There's growth stuff that you put in your back pocket and say, cool, we got this now. But they didn't get the win. And that's what Hubert said. In the end, they got it out. So I think North Carolina needs to be in position moving forward when they win games like this. If they're going to be a national championship contender, your grit is formed, I think, in January more than any other month. You don't you can't form it late. You don't suddenly get gritty in March. You have to get gritty in January, and then you have to roll with being gritty in February. And by the time you go into March, it's who you are. Now, I do think they had a lot of that. But grit also means boxing out. Grit means stepping in there, not getting beat off the dribble, help side. Virginia had 5 dunks in this game. 17 layup attempts, 5 dunks. And most of that was in the second half. So, yeah, a lot of positive things to move forward with. But 11-6, 3-3. Who would have thought that?
Yeah.
And again, just like at Pitt, it's a game they should have won. So after a while, you got to win the games you're supposed to win. When you position yourself to win, you got to take care of business on the road, like they did at home last week, and they didn't do it. So I have no idea what to expect at Louisville this weekend. I would not sell Louisville short in that game because they'll be ready to play. And it'll be a test of the Tar Heels mentality because they're going to look at the standings and see Louisville's record, but that shouldn't matter because this team needs to play better. It needs to play better for more minutes during each game in order to win games. I think they know that. I think they saw that again tonight. And to me, that is the biggest takeaway.
Well, AJ, that's where we'll wrap it up. Again, North Carolina with a 65-58 loss to Virginia. The Tar Heels will be back in action on Saturday at 2:00. They tip off against Louisville. Me and AJ will be here for your post-game coverage. Thank you for watching.